I want you to sit with me for a minute because something happened this week that most people scroll right past, and I don't think you should. It was quieter than the shouting, and the quiet is exactly why it mattered. It's the evening of June 18th, 2026, Chicago's South Side. A cool night on the ground where a young community organizer once learned his trade. And Barack Obama is standing at a podium at the opening of his presidential center, delivering what sounded on the surface like a gentle speech about American values: hope, decency, getting along. The kind of thing a former president says at a ribbon cutting. But if you listen closely, and I mean really listened, he was doing something else entirely. He was delivering a pointed, unmistakable criticism of the sitting president of the United States. And here's the part most people watching didn't catch. He never said the man's name, not once. He let the silence do the naming for him. And that choice to indict without pointing tells you something about this whole strange rivalry and about the state of a country where the two most recognizable political figures we have are locked in a feud that only one of them seems able to stop talking about. This touches you more than you'd think. It touches how your kids learn to argue with people they disagree with. It touches whether public life in this country is still about ideas or just about who can humiliate whom. So stay with me. There's a line Obama said, not this week, but recently, that I want you to hold on to. He said his successor has, in effect, a room in his head, a whole suite in his head. We'll come back to that because it's the sharpest thing anybody has said about this feud. And it came from the calmest man in the room. And there's two numbers really, 57 and 33, and they may explain more about the anger in our politics right now than any speech. Hold on to those, we'll get there. To understand this week, you've got to understand how we got here. Because this didn't start in June, it didn't start this year. The chain runs back more than a decade. Before Donald Trump was a candidate, he was the loudest voice questioning whether Barack Obama was even born in this country. That was the birther campaign, and it was ugly, and it was false, and Obama was eventually pressed into releasing his birth certificate to quiet it. Then came a night in 2011, the White House Correspondents' Dinner, where Obama stood at a podium and gently roasted Trump, who sat in the crowd stone-faced as the room laughed. A lot of people who study these things believe something hardened in that room that night. A grievance was born. Fast forward, Trump wins twice. Now Obama, by tradition, welcomes him to the Oval Office that first time, wishes him well, hands over the keys the way presidents do, the way George Washington started us doing more than 2 centuries ago. That peaceful handoff is the oldest and most beautiful habit we have. And from that day to this one, the relationship has run almost entirely in one direction. Obama, for years, mostly stayed quiet. Famously, frustratingly quiet to some in his own party. There were writers who openly complained that the most gifted communicator the Democrats had was choosing to say the least. He picked his moments. A speech here, a warning there. Back in the summer of 2025 in Hartford, Connecticut, he told a crowd that the country was, in his words, dangerously close to normalizing the behavior of autocracies. That there was a weak commitment at the top of our government to how a democracy is supposed to work. But even then, he tempered it. He called himself still the hope guy, That's who he's always tried to be. Trump, meanwhile, brought Obama up constantly, unprompted in cabinet meetings where he'd wave a hand and call his predecessor overrated, not a smart man, a great divider. In press conferences, in the middle of talking about something else entirely, he'd find his way back to the same name, like a tongue returning to a sore tooth. Every decision echoes for years. And what we watched this week, a former president finally answering in his own house in his own careful way, is the echo of a grievance that was born in a banquet hall 15 years ago and never once let go. Now, let me be precise, because the details this week matter more than anybody's spin. The occasion was the grand opening of the Obama Presidential Center, a 19-acre campus on Chicago's South Side, set to open to the public on Juneteenth. All four living former presidents were there: Clinton, Bush, Biden, and Obama himself. The current president was not. He wasn't invited. In his remarks, Obama warned against giving in to cynicism and despair. He said that when a people stop believing that voting matters, that citizenship matters, that how we treat one another matters, they open the door to the most ruthless and the most fearful among us, to the kind of leaders, he said, who see some people as more equal than others and who treat government as nothing more than a way to divvy up the spoils and punish enemies. He never said a name. He didn't have to. And then, according to reporting from the event, he turned to our institutions, the universities, the law firms, the companies, and said too many of them had fallen for the notion that everything is about money and attention and fame. His wife spoke before him and landed maybe the sharpest blow of the night without ever raising her voice. Michelle Obama praised her husband's stubborn optimism, and then she said this, that a lasting legacy isn't an award or a name on a building or a number of zeros in a bank account. It's the difference we make in one another's lives. Now, you tell me who that was aimed at. A man who has put his name on more buildings than anyone in American life, and who has openly campaigned for the very Peace Prize her husband won. And this wasn't the only place Obama spoke lately. On a podcast, asked how he handles the constant attacks, he said with a laugh that you'd have to ask the other fellow about the obsession, that he clearly occupies a room in the man's head, a suite even. Now here's the other side of the ledger, and I'll lay it out plainly. In February, the sitting president shared an artificial intelligence video on his own social platform that depicted the Obamas as apes. It was taken down after a wave of criticism. In May, over about 36 hours, he posted more than 50 times, accusing Obama of serious wrongdoing without evidence. At one point, resharing a message that called his predecessor a traitor and demanded his arrest. He claimed Obama had spent over $100 million renovating a reflecting pool at the Lincoln Memorial, a claim the Associated Press checked and found to be off by nearly $70 million. The real figure was around $34 million. He shared a mock lineup of political rivals in prison mugshots. And at a press conference during the G7 summit, by one count, he referenced Obama 8 separate times. He also, around that same stretch, posted a doctored image of the new Obama Center itself, rendering its tower as a giant trash can. Let that sit for a second. A president of the United States spending his time making cartoons out of a library on the south side of Chicago. And the polling underneath all of it? A CNN survey around that time put Obama's favorability at 57%, and the current president's at 33, a low for his presidency. That's a 24-point gap between the man doing most of the talking and the man he keeps talking about. In all my years watching this town, I've learned to read a gap like that. It's not a scoreboard, it's a diagnosis. All right, let me put my analyst hat on, because the strategy here on both sides is worth examining. Start with Obama. Why not name him? Because naming him is what the other man wants. A name fight is a fight between two people. And in a fight between two people, both get smaller. By refusing the name and speaking only in principles, voting, citizenship, decency, Obama does two things at once. He lands the criticism, and he places himself above the brawl. It's a discipline most of our politicians have forgotten. Whether you love the man or can't stand him, that is a master class in restraint. And there's a reason the calm approach works on this particular opponent. A man who feeds on attention is starved by composure. You cannot draw somebody into a shouting match if they refuse to shout. Michelle Obama's line about legacy, that it isn't a name on a building or zeros in a bank account, cut deeper than any insult precisely because it was said in the register of a mother giving advice, not a rival throwing a punch. There's an old wisdom in that. The softest voice in the room is often the one that lands. Now the harder question, and it's the one worth the whole video. Who actually benefits from this feud? Ask yourself that honestly, because a feud is useful to somebody, always. When the conversation is about Barack Obama, a man who left office 9 years ago, it is not about the price of groceries that keep climbing. It is not about your health insurance or your rent or the war that was raging across the ocean that very week with American ships and American sailors in harm's way. An old rivalry is a warm blanket you can pull over an inconvenient present. It's a magician's trick. Watch this hand so you don't watch the other. So every single time you see this fight flare up, I want you to build a habit. Ask the quiet question, what were we talking about right before this started? What did this help us forget? 9 times out of 10, the answer to that question is the real story. Now, I want to be fair here, because this isn't about one party. And if I only aimed my criticism in one direction, I wouldn't be leveling with you. Let me say something my own side won't want to hear. There is a danger in a Democratic Party that keeps reaching for Barack Obama like a favorite photograph. A danger in nostalgia doing the work that new leadership is supposed to do. A radio host named Charlemagne, the God said it bluntly this week, that some of these lines sound good on a podcast, they go viral, but they don't always match how these men actually behave when they're in a room together. That's a fair shot. There's a version of this where Obama's soaring words become a substitute for the hard, unglamorous work of building something new. And the party keeps losing while telling itself a beautiful story about the past. And to be fair to Obama himself, he'd be the first to say his own record had failures. He kept a plaque on his desk that read, "Hard things are hard." He's admitted his own shortcomings, his own unfinished business. A man honest enough to say that is a man worth listening to, even when you disagree. But honesty about the past doesn't win the future. Only work does. So let me be straight with you about where this goes. I see 3 roads. Scenario A, the hopeful one. Obama's approach, calm over cruel, principle over person, actually breaks through the noise. It reminds a tired country that you can be tough without being vicious, that you can fight for something without setting fire to everyone who disagrees. And a rising generation of leaders in both parties decides that's the tone worth copying. That would be a gift. Scenario B, the muddle and probably the likeliest. The feud stays a sideshow. Obama gives his careful speeches. The president fires off his midnight posts. The cable channels split the screen and sell the ad time, and the rest of us learn nothing and change nothing. It becomes entertainment, a long-running show with two familiar characters and no ending. It's noise, loud, exhausting, and ultimately hollow, the political equivalent of a television left on in an empty room, talking to nobody all night long. And the tragedy of the muddle is that it feels like something is happening when nothing is. And scenario C, the one that keeps me up at night, the coarsening becomes the norm. The doctored videos, the mugshot montages, the casual talk of arresting your predecessor, these stop being shocking. Our children grow up believing this is simply how leaders talk about each other. That public life is a demolition derby and cruelty is just the price of admission. That's the road where we don't just lose an argument, we lose the habit of decency itself. And a country can survive a lot of things, but I'm not sure it survives forgetting how to disagree. My honest assessment, we're living in B and drifting toward C, and only ordinary people pull us back toward A. So let me pay off what I promised you. That line, the room in his head, the suite in his head, I called it the sharpest thing said in this whole feud, and here's why. It wasn't an insult. It was a diagnosis. It named the strange truth that one of these men can't stop talking about the other, and the other barely has to try. And those two numbers, 57 and 33, they tell you that the man doing most of the shouting is the less popular of the two, which is worth remembering the next time you're told that the loudest voice must be the winning one. In politics, as in life, the person who can't stop bringing up an old rival is usually the one who's still losing the argument in his own head. Now, here's the plain truth, said as gently as I know how. I've watched this country get mean before, and I've watched it get kind again. I've seen us mistake cruelty for strength, and then sooner or later remember that the strongest people we ever knew, a grandmother, a teacher, a veteran down the street, were almost never the loudest ones in the room. So I'm not asking you to pick a side in a celebrity feud. I'm asking you to decide what kind of citizen you want to be inside of it. Reject the cynicism, that part Obama got exactly right. Keep voting, and the small elections and the big ones. And this week, do one thing that has nothing to do with either of these men. Talk to a neighbor who sees the world differently than you do, and really try to understand why. That's the muscle a democracy runs on. It's the one we've let go slack. Because here's what I know after a lifetime of watching. The feuds fade. The famous names blur together in the history books. But the small, stubborn decency of ordinary citizens, that's the thing that actually holds a country together when the powerful are busy tearing at each other. Stay engaged. Don't just watch, show up, and take care of each other. That's what I'm asking you to think about tonight. God bless.